It's 11:59 at Gun Owners Radio, and this is the Penn Patriot, music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, and another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind American lines, this is your song.
So everybody has heard about how horrible and tragic and frustratingly sad it is that Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA was assassinated in Utah while he was engaged in political discourse. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and we're going to talk more about Charlie Kirk in a little bit because he has earned it and deserves to be talked about. But I want to talk about something that we've mentioned on the show a lot, and I personally have talked about a lot, and that is political violence and how it's number one, a problem, and it has escalated over the past few years. But number two, it is a problem from the left. I mean, all political violence is a problem, but it is far more common and actually being encouraged, supported from the political left. And for the purposes of this conversation, I think we're just going to, as much as we can, refer to it as the political left. I don't think we need to break it down into, Democrat or liberal or whatever. But it is accurate to say that the political left is encouraging and escalating political violence. They've created an environment to where horrible political violence is possible, is encouraged, happens. It's not just something that's talked about. And that is the one thing that people across the political spectrum, from what I've seen, keep talking about, that, hey, this assassination of Charlie Kirk, there's an environment that was created that enabled it to happen. The political left has created an environment that encourages, excuses, and embraces political violence. And that's a big claim. And I think that people who are on the political left, or even people who are sympathetic, or, they want less argument, they want less strife, would even push back on it, say, oh, no, it's across the board. But this is truly a situation where the two sides are not equal. And I wanted to give some evidence for that. And we have a lot of evidence to give. We're going to talk about it. Neapolitan News Service poll asked, this was the question they asked: well, it is always difficult to wish ill of another human being. Is America better off now that Charlie Kirk has been killed? That's the question that they asked. Is America better off now that Charlie Kirk has been killed? 26% of those aged 18 to 34 answered yes to the question. Among Democrats, 24% also responded affirmatively. 31% of respondents who identify with Democratic New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who arguably is the torchbearer of the Democratic Party right now, with those who agree with her policies, believe the country is better off after Charlie Kirk's murder. Across all respondents, 15% answered affirmatively to the prompt, 67% said no, and 18% were unsure. 38% of Democrats said they had prayed for Kirk, his wife, and his children, compared to 75% of Republicans and 55% overall. Among Republicans, 57% described Kirk's assassination as, quote, a significant turning point in American history, compared with 40% of all respondents and only 26% of Democrats. This shows that there is a clear divide between the two philosophies, the two sides, however you want to phrase it. It's not just the simple, well, both sides do it, and gee, aren't both sides wrong? There is definitely an environment that has been fostered and created on the political left that is that absolutely led to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I think one important point is we talk a lot about this, of course, was not a mass shooting. This was an assassination. But I'll tell you, it was on a school campus. So this shooting, this death is going to be added to the numbers by the anti-gunners as a school shooting. This will be considered a school shooting. No one else in the country will consider this a school shooting. But the left will say, hey, this is a school shooting. And when you see statistics on school shootings and you wonder why they're so high, even though you haven't heard about them on the news, that's because they take these types of murders and include them in school shootings. So it's important to understand that this assassination, this murder, there was an environment that was created. The shooter wasn't crazy. There's no indicator that he had mental health issues. So when we do look at other shootings, especially other mass shootings or multiple killings, however you want to phrase it, there's always this long list of red flags, and it's clear that the person was, having a break with mental health. It's clear that the person was having a psychotic episode or something like that. This murderer who killed Charlie Kirk, there is no indication that he had any kind of mental health issues at all. This is a person who made a decision, was influenced to make a decision, was in an environment to where the decision that he made seemed logical and right and viable and okay to him. And I think that's an important point to make, and people use the term radicalized. He was radicalized. Frankly, I don't think he was all that radicalized. That would imply that he's some kind of outlier, that his political beliefs and thoughts, it made him some kind of outlier. Frankly, he was just brought into what is fairly mainstream left political thought these days. So what I'm saying is there is a huge difference between the two sides, left and right. They definitely see political violence in a very different way. He doesn't seem to have had any kind of mental health issues. And frankly, he wasn't radicalized in the sense that his political beliefs were so extreme that they put him outside of the realm of normal when it comes to left-leaning politics these days. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that Charlie Kirk is a good representation of what a lot of the people on the moderate right believe. And all of the people that I see online, I have muted more people on social media in the last 2 weeks than I have ever over anything, because I just saw so much hatred and so much horrible rhetoric that felt pointed to people like me, felt pointed at me, people that I know who were celebrating this assassination. I think, would they celebrate my assassination? I have very similar political beliefs. And I thought that was a really interesting poll response, because even the way the poll was phrased, while it is always difficult to wish ill of another human being, I didn't see a lot of difficulty when people were wishing ill on Charlie Kirk and all of the people who are supporting him. I saw some videos of a Turning Point USA event, and people in the comments were saying like, "Oh, where's the bombs? Like, let's bomb that place," and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if we're thinking about political violence as something that is unacceptable, that we don't condone in the United States, that we should not condone, why are we seeing so much celebration of it online? And it's really honestly scary.
Did you see people comparing it? Well, gee, how come nothing was said about the lawmakers in Minnesota who were assassinated?
I saw a lot of that.
And I thought, okay, well, you're right. Doesn't that kind of prove the point? Nothing was said. Nobody celebrated that. The political right didn't stand up and say, woohoo, we got one. And they were basically, I think, unintentionally proving the point that this is a very much a left problem. This is a political left problem. That the fact that, okay, well, first off, I don't think that those lawmakers in Minnesota are equal when it comes to stature as Charlie Kirk.
No, and I'll also say that I think the way that this assassination occurred impacted the outcome a lot. It was on, a college campus. It was a huge event. It was on video. There were tons of different angles. Within 20 minutes of the shooting, we were seeing videos of this man bleeding to death on stage. Like, that did not happen with the Minnesota lawmakers. Was it horrible? Yes. And actually, we referenced it on the show. We talked about it a little bit. I think when that happened, we talked briefly about.
You're talking about the Minnesota Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't celebrate. And
we did not celebrate it.
Vicious.
We were like, yeah, this is
horrible.
another act of political violence. This isn't good for the country.
Right.
And I saw a lot of really sad news articles about it right after the fact when the Minnesota lawmakers were killed, and the fact that other lawmakers had been targeted but were out of town on vacation, and everybody was kind of just like, wow, this is a sad, bad thing. I did not see a single point from any of my friends, and I'm friends on social media with a lot of very, very conservative, love Trump, MAGA supporters, all of that. I'm friends with a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum. I did not see any celebrations, but I have seen a lot of celebrations on my social media feed from people that I know in person about this one, and I think that is a huge difference.
It's standard. And it brings up the question, okay, if it's different, if there is this huge celebration now, is it just because it's Charlie Kirk? Was he such a divisive person that it sparked this kind of thing? In other words, the fact that it was Charlie Kirk make things different, even though all the guy did was practice political public discourse. That's all the guy did. He had differing opinions. But let me talk about this. The network Contagion Research Institute, the NCRI, found that 48% and 55% of, quote, left of center, end quote, people at least somewhat justifying murder for Elon Musk and President Trump, respectively. So when surveying all respondents, only 38% said killing Trump would be, quote, at least somewhat justified, meaning there was significantly higher justification among self-identified liberals specifically, the NCRI said. 1/3 of Democrat voters surveyed in July of 2024 in a Snap poll openly agreed with the statement, quote, I wish Trump's assassin hadn't missed. Same poll found that white Republicans are racist. So they 55% agreed and only 20% disagreed. So in other words, it's not just Charlie Kirk. It's not just the fact that it was Charlie Kirk. This was a poll talking about Trump and talking about Elon Musk. Elon Musk, who, by the way, used to be a darling of the left.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Used to be a huge left-wing darling when it comes to politics.
How quickly they turn, though.
How quickly they turn. And for them to say, a third of Democrat voters said that, I wish that then candidate ex-President Trump, I wish the assassin hadn't missed. And again, white Republicans are racist. 55%. 55% of Democrat voters believe that if you're a white Republican that you are racist.
Yeah.
Only 20% disagreed with that. From a recent article from YouGov titled What Americans Really Think About Political Violence, they wrote this. This is right from the article. It is true that liberal Americans are more likely than conservatives to defend feeling joy about the deaths of political opponents. 16% of liberals say this is usually or always acceptable, including 24% of those who say their ideology is very liberal and 10% who say they are liberal but not very liberal. That compares to only 4% of conservatives and 7% of moderates. But even among the very liberal, the share who say it's unacceptable to feel joy about the deaths of political opponents outnumber those who say it's acceptable by a ratio of more than 2 to 1. So 56% versus 24%. So they basically asked, they said, hey, is it okay to feel joy about the death of a political opponent?
Remember that we are not lawyers and nothing that we say is to be taken as legal advice. Our sponsor, John Dillon, is a lawyer, and he has been helping to fight those gun violence restraining orders, GVROs, and more. So if you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, give John a call. His website is dillonlawgp.com, and his phone number is 760-642-7150.
Is it okay to feel joy about the death of a political opponent? And overwhelmingly, Democrats said, oh, absolutely. It's absolutely okay. In fact, 2-1 versus Republicans, they said that it's okay to feel joy about the death of a political opponent. Now, what that means is it's not just limited to Charlie Kirk. This wasn't just because it was Charlie Kirk. They talk about not only other people like Elon Musk and Trump, but they also have a very broad question, just referencing political opponents in general.
Yeah.
So, political opponents in general, just people that simply agree. And I think it's crystal clear that this idea of political violence, or at least an environment where political violence is considered okay, is being fostered by the left.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference when it comes to kind of the concept of the sanctity of life and what life means, and the fact that we each only get one life. I think a lot of people on the left, like the 16% who said it's usually or always acceptable to feel joy, I think they're also typically the group that doesn't believe in an afterlife. So they're feeling joy about this thing that is final to them in their beliefs. There was a stat earlier.
I don't believe in an afterlife, though.
No, me neither. But
you know what I mean? But
conservatives are more likely to have religious beliefs, like leaning Christian, and we saw something about earlier. You said about people praying for Charlie Kirk and his family. It was higher on the conservative side. So I'm saying it's even worse that liberals are okay being happy about people dying when they also believe that, like, that's it. That person is dead forever. There's no future for them.
You're saying it's even worse.
Yeah, I'm saying it's even worse.
That's an interesting perspective. Wow.
That they believe that that's final, that this person is dead forever. There's no future for them. There's no afterlife. There's nothing. And they're still happy that that person is dead. I think that's really shocking to me.
That's an interesting perspective.
If you look at the consistency of their beliefs and their statements and the things that, and the polls will even show it too, is that what they believe and what they back up and what they side with, for lack of a better way to describe it, is very selfish. They defend those that they agree with and those that agree with them. They think for themselves or about themselves. They don't have compassion for those outside of their circle.
Right.
With the same thing like Elon, right? As soon as Elon was no longer in agreement with them, well, boom, he was out, right? They protect them and they protect their own. And I think that's one difference between the political right and the political left, is the political right believes what they believe, but they believe in and fairness, and they believe in allowing you to, much like Charlie emulated, is the idea of let's have discussions. I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to like you, but I'll respect you. And so it kind of shows really the right from the left, from a more of me-centered versus us.
Well,
kind of
perspective. So one of the, I think I've said many, many, many times, I'm not a Republican. I'm definitely not a Democrat, but I'm not a Republican.
Right.
I mean, I have a lot of problems with the Republican Party.
Right.
I have very much my own point of view. I'm unapologetic about the Second Amendment, and very much have my own points of view. But being someone outside and looking at the two different parties, not just like for entertainment, but professionally, I have to look at both different parties and evaluate them in a professional way. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of concepts that are clear to me. One is, the left is very sympathetic towards groups and very unsympathetic towards individuals.
Well, groups that agree with them.
Well, what I'm saying is,
not all groups.
If they want, it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is that they look at groups of people, like based on their heritage or based on whatever. They look at the groups of people and say, "Hey, we have to help these groups of people. This group of people is important, to us for whatever reason." But individually, an individual from that group, they're not going to have the same level of empathy.
Oh, 100%. I see what you're saying.
Now, the other side is Republicans are the exact opposite.
Yes.
They aren't sympathetic towards groups at all. But like let's just say a Mexican immigrant. Mm-hmm. You'll see from the left, we love Mexican immigrants. Right. We have to have more Mexican immigrants. We have to help Mexican immigrants. But then if they actually meet a Mexican immigrant, hey, not in my neighborhood. get
Right.
out of here.
Yeah, not staying in my guest bedroom.
Right. Now, the other side of that with Republicans are like, we don't want a bunch of Mexican immigrants, especially if they're illegal immigrants. But if they meet an illegal Mexican immigrant, hey, you know what? Let's get them some food. Let's get them some shelter. Let's get them some, whatever. So I've definitely noticed that. The other concept, though, that has become clear to me is that the political left is far more comfortable with by any means necessary. In other words, or the ends justify the means.
Yeah.
Whereas the right is more like, hey, it's more about how you play the game. We want to get there, but we got to follow rules. Where the left is like, we don't care. The ends, what we're trying to get to, the goal that we're trying to get to, is more important than how we get there. So however we need to get there, we have to get there. And I think that both of those observations that I've made in the last 10 years of doing this, 10 years plus, they lead to fostering an environment where political violence is just okay. I firmly believe that you can believe in what the left believes in, and you can hold every single political point of view that they have and still not foster political violence.
Yes.
You can believe in higher taxes. You can believe in, a welfare state. You can believe in all the things they believe in and still be completely and totally against. So I think I've definitely you can't blame it on their beliefs. You can blame it on their state of mind. You can blame it on their foundational, worldview. But I don't think you can blame it on their, individual political stance or stances.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think we're seeing that a lot more individuals on the left are okay with political violence. I still don't think it's the majority, even I think that one poll showed 16% of liberals are happy about it or whatever, right? So it's still not the majority. I think what we're saying here and what we're trying to bring to light is that this is a problem that's getting bigger. It's getting worse as time goes on. And we all have to collectively come together and stop this from continuing, because it is not good for the American people. It is not good for the country. It is not good for our children or our children's children to live in a culture that accepts and allows for this kind of violence on a regular basis. I think that a lot of what I'm seeing online and from friends is this concept that, political violence is, a little bit more targeted, usually a politician, whatever. Charlie Kirk's assassination was political violence. There is no way around it. That's what it was. I'm seeing a lot of people say, well, we don't even really know if that's why he was assassinated. Yes, we do. We know that it was political violence, and we should be against all political violence on both sides, and everybody needs to come together and agree on that, because that should be like a simple tenet of the United States of America, where we can all have our opinions, we can say what we want to say, and we still get to go home to our families, and nobody celebrates our death.
It is. Now, you were talking, okay, so let's go back to, you were saying, hey, it's not the majority, and you're right. But, both sides have their fringe. Both sides have people who probably embrace the idea of violence for a political purpose. But the problem is, the difference is, and the reason that the left has fostered an environment where the right has not fostered an environment is the fact that it is far more widespread and actually coming from the leadership from the left.
Yes.
So when you're using it on your firearms, because it takes about 3 cleanings, so I like to say it's a clean shoot, clean shoot, clean shoot process, much like seasoning a cast iron skillet. So you're going to field strip your firearm, break it down, and then you're going to put our product on piece by piece by piece, covering the entire firearm. Then you're going to take the barrel, you're going to clean the barrel inside of that, and then you come back and you wipe it all off, and you're done. It's that easy. Remember, seal one and done.
But the problem is, the difference is, and the reason that the left has fostered an environment where the right has not fostered an environment is the fact that it is far more widespread and actually coming from the leadership from the left.
Yes.
So it's not just the masses, it's the leaders that are kind of casually throwing this out there. And here's actually, let me show you, we're going to play clip one. It's a montage from media leaders and political leaders.
Destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
when a leader uses language that is more likely than not to radicalize.
Democracy is on the ballot still.
Democracy is on the ballot.
Democracy is on the ballot.
Democracy's on the ballot.
Democracy's on the ballot.
Democracy is literally on the ballot.
Democracy is on the ballot for this election.
Vice President Harris has made very clear that democracy is on the ballot here.
Democracy, of course, is, as the president likes to say, on the ballot.
Terrorism experts call this stochastic terrorism, where somebody has been so demonized that it creates this heightened risk of lone wolf actors.
Donald Trump is turning this nation into Nazi Germany.
You now have a president, as you said, talking about exterminating Latinos.
A re-election of Donald Trump could mean the end of democracy.
This would be the end of America.
An actual Trump-led wannabe empire is the end of democracy.
Stochastic terrorism is a way of using language that is clearly meant to incite some percentage of the people listening for a violent purpose.
What does that potentially do for unbalanced people out there?
He is destructive to our democracy.
Okay, so that's not some fringe newsletter in somebody's basement or some kind of, podcast that nobody watches. That was mainstream media. Those are people, those are talking heads that everybody has seen and watched. Those are political leaders, those are media leaders. And they're clearly using, every election use some hyperbole. Like, oh, it's so important. We have to get people motivated. And there's some level of hyperbole. But the hyperbole that they are using is so hyperbolic. It's so extreme. It's such a threat to someone's existence, And I want to show one more clip because they started talking about just how bad their political opponents are, Trump and, Republicans in general, that sort of thing. But it used to be 20 years ago that the first person who brought up Hitler to compare or called Nazis, like they lost. The first person to bring it up, it was such a ridiculous comparison, where now it's just done on the nightly news. It's done as a political campaign slogan. And I want to show, I think this next clip shows just how extreme that language has become when it comes to, the left painting the right as not just somebody they disagree with, but somebody that's dangerous. Let's play clip 2.
Especially in the earliest days of Nazi Germany, are the dangers that we need to react to now.
I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to wait until the jackboots are marching down the street and the brown shirts come rolling out, our kids get enrolled in Trump Youth?
Modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons.
Well, we're talking about the death of a constitutional republic. That's what happened in Germany in 1933, 1934.
That MAGA symbol has come to represent something. It is the new Nazi symbol. It is the new hood.
We'd be looking at a time in Nazi Germany where people ran around with signs like this new ICE sign.
You look back at history, business was silent in the 30s and 40s. Business didn't speak out in Europe, often didn't speak out in the U.S. against.
And Hitler described you could get Americans to give up their own democracy and to be ready for a fascist takeover.
So this is mainstream. I mean, this is as mainstream as it gets. It's as, the folks that you just saw are as popular on the left as it possibly gets. I mean, they're making it acceptable. And I just want to tell one quick story about how back in the early 90s after Waco, Wayne LaPierre, who actually from the NRA described federal law enforcement that responded to Waco as jackbooted thugs. He put out a fundraising letter that said, hey, we have to fight back against these jackbooted thugs. That was the term, which a jackbooted thug, of course, is basically calling federal law enforcement Nazis. The president of the United States, Bush Sr., actually turned in his NRA card. I mean, the NRA took a huge hit for this. Wayne LaPierre took a huge hit for this. It was so unacceptable to say that back in the early 90s it was just such a massive PR blow to the NRA. Now, on the left, it's just completely and totally acceptable. You just call the other person, a Nazi. You call the other person Hitler.
And I'm not saying that the federal government in the Waco situation was equivalent to Nazi Germany, but I think that what we're seeing now is that the left is equating the words of people on the right to actual physical violence.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that, I mean, in the Waco situation, it was a little bit different. There were actually people with guns going to get, like, it was a violent situation of actual violence where people died. What we're seeing on the right is not people dying and the general Republican Party and conservatives going out on the street and, killing people because they're, a different gender or a different race or a different whatever. And that's what they're trying to say that we are. They're saying fascist takeover. They're saying things that are made to put fear in people's minds. And I think it has worked remarkably well because I see people who I think otherwise 10, 15 years ago probably would have said, it doesn't really matter what party you align with, doesn't really matter your political views, we can all be friends, we can all sit at the same dinner table. To today, those same people are so against even having conversations or discussions with people who don't agree with them. They're literally saying things like, I will not waste my time talking to somebody who's MAGA because they want to, marginalize my community. They want to incite violence on me because I'm bisexual or I'm whatever. They're just making things up to feel like they are in danger. And I think that the left and the leaders on the left have done a great job of kind of creating that environment where people actually feel afraid of the other political side. They're afraid of their opponents.
The hyperbole has worked so well that it's turned into a call for action.
Yes, 100%.
People are basically, it's not just a matter of, I'm going to vote the other way, which is what normal political hyperbole, what they're trying to get them to do. Like, hey, we just need you to vote a different way.
Mm-hmm.
This hyperbole is going, hey, we need you to actually hate people and possibly cause harm and isolate and,
100%.
Well, I think you're right. It is a call for action. It's not just hyperbole. And there's actually a clip that I think I wanted to show you. Let's play clip 3.
Hitler in 1933 was talking about his designs on America. And Hitler described you could get Americans to give up their own democracy and to be ready for a fascist takeover. Haunting. And that's what Hitler himself explained. He part of the Hitlerian conspiracy for Americans getting rid of their democracy. And this stuff doesn't change. It's the same playbook. It's a disaster. We need extreme measures.
Modern day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those.
We have to start calling his supporters racist as well. That MAGA symbol has come to represent something. It is the new Nazi symbol. It is the new hood.
Democracy and freedom versus dictatorship and authoritarianism.
We want to remain a democracy, or do we want to take this hard turn into an autocracy and taking direct aim at our democracy? There are autocratic-leaning remarks he has made in recent weeks and months, such as ones that echo Hitler.
They're not a party, right? They're Sinn Féin to the IRA. They're the PLO to Hamas. They're a dime store front for a terrorist movement.
The Republican Party is basically a domestic terrorist cell at this point, and they should be treated as such.
There are elements of the GOP that are starting to look like the jihadists.
Not a political party. They're a white nationalist movement. They're a fascist threat to our nation. That's not hyperbolic. That's academic.
Would have once seemed hyperbolic, but it increasingly does feel like the Republican Party has become a death cult, and it's all about Donald Trump.
There is no alternative right now because the Republican Party project today is a fascist authoritarian project.
Domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania.
So words matter. Words are important. The words that they're using are extreme. And I think that the tip-off, what really started a descent into political violence being fostered and being acceptable and being talked about as if it's just okay, probably really started about 15 years ago. Now, there was definitely, for decades, there have been, concepts that mirror, what's going on right now. But what really, when these concepts started turning into actual actions was probably about 15 years ago, when you started hearing terms on college campuses or in corporate America. You started hearing terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, of course, the actual words diversity, equity, and inclusion aren't the problem. Those are, nothing wrong with those words. It's the concept behind those words when strung together. Violence, or words equaling violence, that concept was introduced. Comparisons to Hitler became a rule. It became okay. Cancel culture was invented. Cancel culture was basically the equivalent of mob justice, whereas back 150 years ago, 100 years ago, you'd get a bunch of people who said, hey, we're going to do something about this. Forget about the law and order, and we're going to go after somebody. Well, cancel culture is really the digital equivalent of that, the modern digital equivalent of that. Hey, we disagree with somebody. It's not even that this person is dangerous or has done something horrific, because really mob justice was about going after somebody who slipped through the cracks of justice. Maybe they did commit some kind of heinous murder or something like that, and the mob just said, we don't care if you can prove it in court or not. We're going to go after them. Whereas cancel culture was, hey, we just don't like this person. We disagree with this person. So digitally, we're going to gang up on them. All this is happening in the 2010s, this change in terminology and the severity and scope started changing. And then COVID hit in 2020, and I think that amplified it. People were getting banned if they didn't toe the government line about what was going on with COVID. Society started turning on people if they didn't, comply with certain pieces of what was happening with COVID, whether it was a mask or social distancing or whatever. And it really got to the point where people weren't just disagreeing, or people weren't getting punished or isolated or whatever. They weren't going after people just because they disagreed with them. But even if you had a question, even if you were like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't adding up for me, and I have a question about what's going on, then you were ostracized or worse. And it's of course, it's hard to tell the difference if COVID was a political issue or not. There certainly were a lot of politics surrounding COVID. But the actions that led to the systems that were created and advanced during COVID really helped extreme political rhetoric thrive. So I'm not saying that COVID and the spread of COVID is responsible for political violence. But what I'm saying is the way people reacted during COVID and the systems that were put in place and the consequences for people who didn't toe the line that were put in place, well, that definitely helped political violence thrive. In the environment that we're in right now, political violence was able to thrive because of the way that people reacted to what was happening with COVID. This is brought to you by Cargo, cases and rugged gear outfitters in El Cajon. Go to cargostores.com, buy something today, or visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. There are two enemies of your firearms, rust and the government. The good news is Cargo has your back on both fronts. As a proud sponsor, they're helping us fight to get more pro-Second Amendment officials into office, and their rugged cases help you keep your firearms secure and protected. Built like a tank, Cargo cases are stackable, weatherproof, and ready for anything. Whether you're hitting the range or going off the grid, you need a Cargo case. Whether for your gun or other equipment, you need a Cargo case. And here's something that's just for our listeners. If you buy a Cargo case in the store at Cargo Rugged Gear Outfitters in El Cajon, just mention Gun Owners Radio, and you're going to get a free desiccant pack. And that's going to help keep your gear bone dry, battle ready, and rust free. Visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. Great products, great prices, and uncommonly good service. Cases and rugged gear outfitters. Cargo. Check them out. Political violence was able to thrive because of the way that people reacted to what was happening with COVID. And I don't even think that's that controversial a statement, but is it just me? I want you to watch this clip. It's Piers Morgan. He had a guest, and I thought that she summed things up really, really well when it comes to basically everything we've been talking about now. So go ahead and play clip 4.
I'm finding myself very caught between, on the one hand, wanting to honor his legacy of unity through debate and coming together to take down the temperature, and then wanting to honor his legacy of telling the truth. And the truth is, this is not a both sides issue. The killer killed him, according to police reports, because he found Charlie Kirk to be spreading hate. This is a view shared by every single prominent Democrat. Yes, there are people on Blue Sky advocating for violence, but what actually caused this was the utterly quotidian, utterly ubiquitous demonization of the political opposition from the left. And it has just led to violence because they said the other side were Hitler and Nazis. They said that speech is violence. To combine those two things together is to sign the death warrant of prominent conservatives. And that is what we are seeing again and again and again. And it is utterly facetious to suggest that there is any comparison between political violence on both sides. Every example they bring is not actually showing that, whether it's Governor Shapiro, whose attempted assassination was from a Free Palestine leftist, or whether it was the Minnesota assassinations, which were from somebody who said he was operating at the behest of Democrat Governor Tim Walz. There is a culture among Democrats at the highest level to suggest that their political opposition are a danger, and that suggests that their lives are forfeit. And I want to come together, but at the same time, we cannot unite with people who are lying to our faces about who we are, who will not take responsibility for the fact that they suggested that we are Nazis because of totally legitimate views that reflect the majority of Americans. So what I say is, let the left say we were wrong. It is legitimate to vote for Donald Trump. It is legitimate to be pro-life. It is legitimate to believe that there are only two genders, and we were wrong to suggest that that was not the case. We were wrong to say that that is hateful. When they say that, I am waiting with open arms to take down the temperature.
So who is that lady? Is that some unhinged Trump, right-wing Republican extremist? No. Her name is, I hope I get this right, Batya Ungar-Sargon. She's an American journalist and author. She's a former deputy opinion editor for Newsweek. Newsweek's not exactly known as some right-wing, publication. She also used to describe herself as liberal, but has since distanced herself due to the left's extreme behavior, according to her. So this is somebody who's in journalism, was left of center. Her politics still remain fairly left of center, but she always considered herself a Democrat, considered herself a liberal, but because of the extremism that's happening in that party, has completely distanced herself from this. This is not somebody who you'd think of as typical as making these comments. This is somebody who sincerely, out of a very real concern, makes her case and says, yeah, the language that they're using is fostering an environment, and that environment is leading to violence. I think it's a pretty strong statement from somebody that you wouldn't expect to be making that statement. What are your thoughts? What did you think when you watched that?
I think it's powerful that she, as you stated, someone that was coming from historically from the other side, who kind of saw through the crap she didn't buy into, and I think that's powerful. Her words are powerful, and I think that, and I want to believe that there's probably a lot of those on the political left that might fall within the same spectrum of where she is, where they don't necessarily believe in the far extreme political left, that are probably more where she likely is, but maybe they're just not quite ready to kind of make that shift as strongly as she has. And I have hope in that. But I think it's powerful what she says, and it has a lot of weight for me.
Well, it is, and what you just said is really important, because I think that there are a lot of people who generally maybe consider themselves left, or maybe they're in the center and really don't have a problem supporting the Democratic Party or whatever. Right. There's a lot of people who just think that, hey, it's a problem, but it's equal. Both sides have their problem. And I think that that's the big point she was trying to make is no. It is so much worse on the political left than it is on the political right. It is so much more violent. They're so much more responsible for what's happening.
Well, and I think people aren't going to, excuse me, I think people aren't going to believe that until they see it being reflected in the news that they're consuming, in the, social media memes and in the, TV media and all of that, because what we're seeing from the media is that the problem is on the right. And if you hear that over and over and over and over again, right, even if you're seeing articles and things that make you question, I wonder if that's true. It seems like there's a lot of political violence on the left lately. Even if you start to question it, you turn on the TV, you read an article, and you're being told over and over and over again that conservatives are violent, that they are inciting violence, that Donald Trump is inciting violence.
That he's Hitler.
That he's Hitler, literally, that he's killing tons of people. Like, it's insane to me the way that the media has perpetrated this lie over and over, and you can hardly find news stories that show what's actually happening in the world. You can't really find an article that's comparing political violence between the left and the right, but I tried for this segment. You can't really find that, but you can find lots and lots of articles that are dedicated towards the political violence that has happened on the right.
Yeah. Well,
you can't really find the comparison because media is not being fair.
And the other thing is, Trump says a lot of rude things. When he was campaigning, when he was in office, he says things that are generally rude. He calls people names. That's not fostering an environment for political violence.
Right.
And number one, just calling someone a name, something rude or whatever, is completely different than selling them on the concept that they are Hitler or they are Nazis or that they are taking away your democracy. That is a major difference. Saying, hey, this person's a jerk or a pig or a horrible person or whatever, that doesn't, at least any rational person, that doesn't lead to, hey, this person needs to die.
Right.
But literally, quite literally, making people believe that, hey, this person is Hitler, is a Nazi, that is absolutely fostering an environment of political violence. I think that's an enormous important difference. The other thing is, it's just Trump. You're not seeing, Senator Rand Paul. You're not seeing Ted Cruz. You're not seeing Marco Rubio. You're not seeing right-wing leaders in the political world that are using that same kind of rhetoric. They're not being rude and horrible to each other as far as, they're just disagreeing. And when you look at talking heads on the right, when you look at podcasters or influencers or authors or however you want to say, all they want to do is debate.
Yeah.
They're just like, hey, I want to show up, I want to debate, I want to beat you with statistics. Mm-hmm. They're not doing it. I mean, but on the left, you can rattle off just about any political leader and you can find some clip that is beyond just name calling.
That feels to me like inciting violence, which is what they say we do all the time just by having our opinions.
Well, one thing I've learned, one thing I've definitely learned as well, about politics and people in general is projection. There's definitely a lot of projection. When you see people, like for example, when you look at anti-gunners and they say, well, gee, they want a gun so they can kill people. And you think to yourself, what are you talking about? That's not what I want a gun for, and well, obviously they're projecting their own views onto other people.
Right.
So you're seeing a lot of that from both sides. A lot of people assume that others think the way they do, have the same opinions generally that they do, or will respond to the same arguments that they will. And that's completely untrue. There's a lot of projection going on. So how bad is it? Are there really that many left-wing incidences of political violence? Well, I found this clip of Senator Eric Schmidt who answers that, and I think in a very effective way. So let's play clip 5.
And I would point out, we've heard years of the left, their loudest voices calling anyone on the right extremist MAGA Republicans, fascists, Nazis, an existential threat to democracy. Check yourself. And don't give me this both sides bullshit. Mr. Director, I want to ask you, the man who tried to kill Republican congressman at the congressional baseball practice, nearly killing House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, left-wing or right-wing violence?
Sir, I believe it was a left-wing ideology.
Okay. Burned down cities during the Summer of Love in the George Floyd riots, left-wing violence or right-wing violence? Left-wing. The Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre, left-wing or right-wing violence? Left-wing. The Lee Zeldin stabbing attempt, left wing or right wing? Left wing. The Covenant school shooting in Nashville, left wing or right wing? Left wing. The Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt on President Trump, left wing or right wing? Left wing. The Trump International West Palm Beach assassination attempt, left wing. The Abundant Life Christian school shooting, left wing. The United Care CEO's murder, left wing. Tesla's burned, keyed, damaged, firebombed, left wing, left wing. The murders at the Israeli embassy, left wing. The ICE facilities firebombed, left wing. The Minnesota Catholic school shooting, left wing. The anti-white Charlotte and North Carolina stabbing, left wing. The attempted Utah News State firebombing, left wing. And now, of course, the culmination of this vile trend, a left-wing assassination of Charlie Kirk. So don't give me this both sides. If we want to get to unity, let's be honest.
I don't think we're ever going to get to unity. I think that one of the things that after really evaluating and seeing, this fostering of political violence from the left, I don't think, this idea of, well, gee, if we all just sit down or we're in the same room together, we'll all hold hands and kumbaya. I think that it has definitely caused me to reevaluate tactics, reevaluate the road I'm on as far as how to reach out to political folks. So let's talk about 1791 Group. If your business is in the firearms industry, you've probably felt it. Marketing's expensive, social media is hostile, and it's far too easy to get lost in the noise.
The 1791 Group fixes that. They help you to cut through the clutter by clarifying your message so customers instantly understand why they should buy from you. Then they build the systems, your website, CRM, ads, and content that actually turn interest into sales. And because they understand the community, they can even get your brand in front of our gun owners' radio audience, which includes over 100,000 engaged gun owners every month.
Don't waste another dollar on marketing that doesn't work. Go to 1791group.com, that's 1791group.com, and tell them Michael from Gun Owners Radio sent you. Start growing with a team that's on your side. I think that it has definitely caused me to reevaluate tactics, reevaluate the road I'm on as far as how to reach out to political folks. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when we just when either side is going to outmaneuver the other side and have them believing, hey, this. I think that there are factions in this country that aren't going to go away, and things have to move towards a how do we live together? How do we coexist rather than how do we convince the other side that we're right? Or how does the other side, how do we compromise or whatever? No, we have to figure out how to coexist. And I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how, to be totally frank. I think that the more effective action that activists need to take rather than trying to convince the other side to side with them is to get more people who agree with you to get more active. I think that is going to, I think that the idea of, hey, if we just talk to them or we sit in the same room or we have a meeting or a debate or we, talk about statistics, but we still talk about emotion, I don't think that exists anymore. I think that you should find people who agree with you and help them get motivated, help them get active. And you should find people who potentially agree with you but really have no opinion on the subject and get them, try to convince them and try to get them active. Show the advantages of your point of view, whether it's Second Amendment or other. And I got to tell you, this thought is brand new to me for the last
Well, it's funny.
15, 20 years.
As you're describing that.
Yeah.
You know who did that?
Who?
Charlie Kirk. Turning Point.
Well,
That's kind of the premise of what he started.
Is what?
The idea of empowering and bringing other people in that are that already are in agreement with you, and then attempting to reach out to find people across the board to find ways to kind of connect and to, as you're describing, find people of like mind.
You get
encourage them, motivate them to get involved.
But I think that the idea of debating, like, hey, let's sit and have a conversation, is I think that the conversations need to be, hey, let's find people that are like-minded and help them better ground their existing opinions, you know what I mean, and educate them on how to win politically and that sort of thing. But the idea that we're going to find vehemently anti-gun people and reason our way into them agreeing with them that's gone. I'm not wasting any more time on that. And by the way, I concede to my critics. I've been criticized for that for at least 10 years. And I concede that I was wrong and that they were right.
Yeah, I'll say that this is kind of a sad segment today. Like, it's kind of a sad topic. It's a sad discussion to be having. And so I just want to kind of mention that we know that this is a heavy topic and that you may not agree with us on everything exactly, and that's totally fine. But I think what I am hearing and what I'm thinking about a lot these days is, how do I get folks who are, maybe kind of in that middle ground of like, maybe I'm interested in having a gun, maybe I'm not interested in having a gun, but I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I think gun violence is bad. Like those people who don't really have a strong opinion. And the very best way that we can reach those people is by people who own guns and enjoy shooting guns talking about that with their circles, because that's how you find out that you have a gun-curious friend. When I got into the firearm industry, I cannot even tell you guys how many people, when I started posting about going to the shooting range, reached out to me in the DMs because they were nervous to comment publicly and have their name visible next to a positive comment about shooting a gun. But so many people reached out to me and said, thanks so much for sharing that you like guns, because it makes me feel more confident going to the range. It makes me feel more confident talking about it with my friends or my coworkers. And I think for so long we have kind of felt silenced, and that our opinions shouldn't be talked about vocally, or that people are, going to have these really strong opinions against us, which is all probably true, and it's getting worse. But I don't think that silence is still the solution that it was not that long ago. And I feel like that is a huge shift. And that's a huge shift for me personally, because I do have friends who didn't know kind of my involvement until the last year and a half, when I started being a lot more vocal about my involvement in the Second Amendment, because I was afraid of losing friendships. But I think, to your point, maybe some friendships are worth losing because there is no winning those arguments. There's no coming to the table and unifying and having similar opinions as other people. There, that correspondence isn't really happening because there's one side that is unwilling to come to the table and even have those conversations in good faith.
Well, I think that the thing fundamentally has to change, and I guess what I'm talking about is in the current environment, this isn't going to work. Simply sitting down and talking to people or trying to reason with them or, even injecting emotion, that's not going to work in this environment. Yeah. So until the environment changes, I'm going to concentrate on what is effective. I'm certainly not going to alienate people. I'm definitely not going to, reject people.
Right.
But what I am going to do is say, hey, here's what I'm doing, and if you'd like to join me, then you're more than welcome to. I think that one possibility is, if there's something for everyone if there is a common good that everyone can concentrate on, that could possibly make a fundamental change in the United States. In other words, and it's kind of the difference between finding common ground and compromise. So compromise means, hey, I want 10 and you want 1, so we'll just do 5, and neither one of us are happy.
Yeah.
Whereas, coming together, finding something in common is more like, hey, I want 10 and you want 1, but we both agree that we like purple. So let's concentrate on purple. It's completely totally different. Mm-hmm. I don't think that things are going to, at least one catalyst to fundamental change would be if there's some kind of common goal that we can all focus on, so that the differences aren't as obvious, and I don't know if that's possible in a post-internet world. Pre-internet, people had thoughts. We don't have thoughts anymore. It's all, we have posts and comments and likes and clicks and whatever. So everybody's most intimate thoughts on everything are all over the place. So I'm not quite sure it's possible.
And there's so much fake news and lying on social media. You know, I don't know if during the Charlie Kirk thing you were seeing these posts as well, but I was seeing a lot of posts comparing it to a kid in Mississippi who committed suicide or likely committed suicide. Did you hear about this?
No, talk about it.
So there was 2 different men who were found hanged from trees in the state of Mississippi. And they were many miles apart. It wasn't even in the same town or close to the same town. But I saw a ton of social media posts saying, say their names, you know, these men were lynched. And there's absolutely no evidence that a lynching occurred. Both of the autopsies are still in progress as of yesterday. And both of the police reports stated that they did not see, or somebody from the police told the media that they did not see any lacerations, did not see any broken bones. From every piece of evidence so far that exists, they both look like suicides. But there were a ton of memes going around, like, you know, just photos of like a screenshot of people saying, like, you know, say their names, they deserve to be recognized just as much as Charlie Kirk does. Why is nobody talking about this? And when you actually like dove into it, you saw that like there's really nothing to talk about. These are 2 men who tragically probably took their own lives. And if it comes out that they didn't take their own lives, if it does come out that there was some, you know, murder involved, that this was foul play, that this was racially motivated hate crime, that will come out and that will be talked about. And people on both sides of the aisle will say that that is a horrible thing that happened.
Right.
If that is what happened. But there is so far no evidence that that's what happened, except for one guy on TikTok who started talking about it like, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. Look, there's 2 guys who hung from trees within 200 miles of each other in the same state, like the couple days after Charlie Kirk. So I saw like, hundreds of posts about this, comparing it to the response about Charlie Kirk. And I think one of the things that kind of reminded me of is that nobody is actually diving into what they're reading. It's a lost art these days to read something.
Just reading headlines and reacting.
Yeah, and think about it and say, does this make sense? Does this track with what's happening politically in the United States? Don't you think if an African-American man was lynched in the state of Mississippi, that would have made headlines? That would have been huge news. It would have been all over everything. But people didn't pause to wonder, like, wait, why haven't I heard about this if this is real? So they didn't look into it. I read the police report. I found all the, you know, statements from the people who were interviewed by the media. Coroner's office, like, released a statement. But nobody was talking about any of that because that in and of itself is a lost art, to go and try to find the real story, to find the, you know, the actual truth in a situation. And I felt that way with the lawmakers in Minnesota that were murdered. I went back after I saw all those comparisons and I looked for articles that were posted the next day so that the timestamp was, you know, kind of not talking about it, you know, oh, this thing happened a few months ago, why didn't we talk about it more? But something that was written at the time. Everything I found was just talking about, you know, how crazy the bad guy was and how sad the situation was. And all the comments on the news posts were very, I thought, very much leaning towards, we're sorry this happened, this is a horrible thing. I didn't really see much rhetoric about, you know, yay, political violence. So that's a long-winded way, I guess, to say that I think one of the most important things that we're missing in the United States right now is just willingness to actually find out the truth about a story. And we have all kind of become our own independent journalists in a way, but we're getting our information from biased sources. So people like to think of themselves as independent journalists, like, oh, I follow all these different news accounts on social media and I'm reading all these different, you know, points of view, but you're really not. You're reading the same point of view written by a bunch of different people.
Just confirming their own bias.
Yes.
Right.
So if you have different political opinions than people in your lives, don't get rid of them on social media. Keep them on your feed so that you can see what they're saying, so that you can have those, you know, opinions brought into your mind, because you may be friends with people that you completely disagree with, but that is a good way to understand what the other side is thinking and feeling and what they believe. And I think that's important. Like, we're kind of missing that now. There's so much divisiveness and so much hatred that nobody is paying attention really to what the other side thinks.
Well, and I think people need to, your opinion is not activism.
No.
I think everybody thinks they have to have an opinion on everything, and having their opinion is some kind of action, whereas it's completely meaningless. Like if you're just sitting there reading, and you're having opinions all day, you're not helping anything, anywhere, any time, in any way. So having to have an opinion on everything, I think it's okay to maybe step back and say, I don't really know enough about this, and that's okay, and I don't need to have an opinion on it. I'm going to go do something effective that'll actually, move the community forward. I did what you were saying, though, about the reaction. I was definitely encouraged and surprised at some of the reaction to what happened. There were, actors and people in entertainment and corporations and sports teams and TV channels and all kinds of people who said, wait. All this guy was doing was talking, and this assassination was horrible. And I was actually very encouraged by that a number of people stepped up. I know it's easy to focus on the negative reaction that we all saw. We saw people laughing and mocking or whatever. But I do think there were many people who were influential who stood up and said, hey, wait a minute, this is important. It's important to make a statement. This person absolutely had an impact on a large group of people. And oh, by the way, the only thing he was doing one of the most American things there is, which is having political public discourse. I was encouraged by that. I was quickly discouraged this week when the conversation from many of the same people who maybe didn't align with Charlie Kirk turned into, they were focused on Jimmy Kimmel getting booted and blaming it on Trump, which, by the way, I was enormously discouraged by the chair of the FCC and some of the comments that guy made about pulling licenses over speech he disagreed with. Didn't like that at all. Yeah. But it was crystal clear that it was a decision made by companies because of feedback from customers. It had nothing to do with the government. But they immediately pivoted. You could see it. If you pull the curtain back, the political curtain back, you could see that these, left-leaning political leaders, this was an opportunity for them to grab back the narrative. Hey, for 2 weeks, they've been talking about political violence coming from the left. We're going to take the narrative and run with it and say, no, you got to understand Trump is trying to take away your right to free speech. In fact, Schumer compared him to, dictators and saying this. So it went right back to it. It went right back to fostering a community or an environment of political violence, which is crazy. I do want to talk. Let's go right into. Let's talk. So that's the situation. That's about what happened and the horrific political violence that did happen. And it is sad and it's horrible that we have to bring it up, but it is something I think that needs to get talked about. It needs to get talked about, and people need to really truly understand that it is a very one-sided issue, that it is more extreme on the other side. So I'm glad that we talked about it. But now I want to talk about Charlie Kirk. Let's actually talk about the man and his legacy and where we are in history. I personally, I didn't follow Charlie Kirk. He would pop up in my feed online. I think it's impossible to have internet access today without seeing, Charlie Kirk talk. But I actually, Turning Point USA paid for me to go give a talk on a couple of different campuses about the Second Amendment. I know some folks that were very involved here locally in San Diego with Turning Point. It seemed absolutely wonderful, but Charlie Kirk wasn't somebody that I, sought out. I didn't go looking for clips of his or anything like that. I do absolutely recognize that, in fact, there were even some things I disagree with Charlie Kirk on. I mean, in general, he was clearly moving the ball forward, but I wasn't intimately familiar with Turning Point USA and him. But clearly, this person was enormously impactful. And I've definitely learned more about him and seen more of what he said over the last week or two than I did, the previous 10 years. And I think it's a couple of points are really important. One is his assassination is as big a deal as, back in the 60s when there were political assassinations. There was like this 5-year period of time in the 60s when Martin Luther King was assassinated, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, RFK, and JFK. I'm not saying that he was, John F. Kennedy was the president of the United States. That in and of itself makes it an enormously big deal. But who he represented, the number of people who John F. Kennedy represented, who RFK represented, who MLK and Malcolm X and Medcrevers, who they represented is definitely equal, as far as the impact they had. One thing that maybe sets him aside significantly is that Charlie Kirk actually created this community. He created this movement from nothing. He was 18 years old when he did it too. He basically stood up and said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to, follow the normal path and go to college, even though he was clearly very intelligent and would have, aced college. He said, I think it's more important for people to have a voice and for me to be a voice. And you got to remember where it started too. When he was 18, this was mid 2000s.
Yeah.
There was enormous hostility towards conservative or right-leaning and religious kids in college. They were being, they were definitely not welcomed, this idea of wokeness and, the DEI and some of the left-leaning concepts that we talked about in 2010, 2010s, they were taking hold, and people who were right of center were being pushed out. They were being marginalized. They were being shut up, and they had no place for a college campus. It was getting really, really bad. Where Charlie Kirk, this 18-year-old, barely an adult, said, hey, you know what? We're going to start having conversations. That's where we're going to begin this. And if you look at some of the early clips of him where he's explaining, like, look, bad things happen when people stop talking. And, clearly conservative or right-leaning kids or religious kids, however you want to phrase it, who were going off to these colleges, their conversation, their speech was being halted, was being ended. And he decided, you know what, we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to motivate people through political speech. And it grew. It grew to tens of millions of dollars in donations every year. It grew into hundreds of thousands of people on hundreds of campuses. And my understanding is that since he was assassinated, it's grown even more. But recognizing the purity of what he was trying to accomplish and who he was standing up for, and the fact that he actually built something from nothing in the political world, I think is what led to that really, really broad support that he received after he was assassinated. Above and beyond the fact of how horrific the idea of being assassinated is, I think that that's what led to people taking a step back and going, hey, wait a minute, I got to rethink, what I'm doing, or I really need to stand up for someone who I didn't agree with. I need to acknowledge the fact that this person was significant and important, and what happened to him was horrific in ways above and beyond someone losing their life, which is already just about the most horrific thing you can think of. And I think that was amazing. I think that his legacy and where we are in America and the world is a different place. The United States is a different place, truly a completely different place in a lot of ways because of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I think for college kids that are conservative, everywhere they look on campus, they are getting their beliefs challenged. Their professors are challenging their beliefs. Their friends are challenging their beliefs. But for kids at college campuses that are left of center, everywhere they go, everybody is telling them that they're right, that their beliefs are exactly correct. And so Turning Point and the chapters that Charlie started all over the place, those were really the only places on college campuses for the majority of the kids, the left of center kids, to hear anything that wasn't completely aligned with their ideology. It was one of the only places where freedom of thought and freedom of speech was actually taking place on campuses. And I think that legacy in and of itself has changed many, many lives. Those people who were impacted by their chapters at their college campuses, who grew into the people that they are today because of the beliefs that they changed while in college. I think that those people are out doing awesome things. I saw some posts, people saying like, oh, here's my photo from my first Turning Point event when I was a freshman in college, and it totally changed my life. And now I'm now I'm in politics as a Republican, or now I'm, working at a church doing this and that. And like everybody had their own kind of unique story, but just getting to see those stories was a really cool thing that came out of a really tragic thing.
He did. And he came to San Diego State within last year, right?
Yeah, he was here not long ago.
It was not long ago. Yeah. I was really surprised. People were like, hey, Charlie Kirk's coming, blah, blah, blah. They were really excited. I was like, nah, I'm not really, not interested. It's not something I was interested in. But I was amazed at how many people were, how many adults, how many professionals, attorneys and business owners who were like, yeah, I'm going.
Yeah.
I definitely want to go see that. I was really, I remember, thinking a little bit about that at the time. Like, really, what are you going to say? It's just, this is for college kids, right? And so he meant more to folks who were, not just college kids, but there was if you turned 18 and went to college in the 2010s, you were a part of like this kind of this bubble wrap generation where like everything is you're so important, and every little concern you have is a massive issue. And I remember wondering in the 2010s, like, okay, what's going to turn this around? What's going to end this, and how are we going to move on to the next thing? Because we can't just maintain this idea that, and I think that he pretty single-handedly was responsible for helping to put an end for putting an end to that. Really, I mean, there's a lot of other things. I think Trump's second election, helped tremendously. There's a lot of other things, but they didn't directly impact. Now there's a whole 15 years worth of folks who turned 18, went off to college, and then found that their voice, found out that, hey, you know what? I do think that whatever right-leaning subject is important. I do think that individualism is whatever it is, whatever that political hot button is. Rather than going to college and it being beaten out of you, it was built, and you were considered normal. And I don't think that can be understated. I don't think that his impact on politics and culture can really truly be understated.
I think one thing that he brought, and much like Dakota, like you said about how when you started going on social media and talking about firearms and shooting, and how the community saw a place to where they saw friendship, right? They saw camaraderie. Charlie Kirk, by going into the universities where our kids are so indoctrinated, there's so much, I think what it was almost a similar thing in that it provided an opportunity for kids who had a different mindset than what a lot of the left was leaning towards in teaching, to where they found a place to where it was okay to think like they did, and they found camaraderie in that. Because otherwise, I think so many of them would have been silent, and they would have kept themselves, and they saw, it's okay to think how I think, and it's okay, and and I'm not alone in that. And he brought a lot of people together, and he allowed an opportunity for people that didn't agree with maybe some of the viewpoints of their professors and things, of someone who was a respected person, to kind of help to light the way, to show them, that it's okay. I'm not wrong in what I think. And he provided, I think, a safe place to where people could allow that to become something that made them feel that they could grow in the way that they needed to grow. And I think that was a powerful thing for people.
I was always really impressed with his ability to stay on point, and there are numerous,
not get wrapped up in emotion.
Yeah, and there are numerous clips of people stepping up to the mic and taking shots at him and making personal attacks on him and whatever. And I can't find a clip where he let that affect him. I can't find a clip where he shot back or had a weakness, or had a bad moment and said, hey, you stink or whatever. He was always really, really good. In fact, I think that he was, maybe even to a fault. It was, I think he maybe could have pushed back a little bit more. I remember seeing him on this podcast, and the podcast is is like just a garbage podcast. I think the only reason it made it into my algorithm is because it was Charlie Kirk. But he was talking to a bunch of like OnlyFans girls, porn stars or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, basically one of them started kind of flirting with him. And I think she was trying to, you know, get his goat or whatever.
Prove,
Yeah,
like,
you know.
yeah, all men like it or something.
And he basically, while he was talking to this girl, his response to her was that that what she was doing, almost verbatim what he said was, what she was doing is not the best use of her talents. I thought, man, what a great way of, you know, I mean, how many other, and meanwhile, how many other people would have insulted this girl? How many people would have marginalized this girl? You know, clearly this girl grew up in a bad environment and had bad things going on, which is how she was able to, you know, do the things that she was doing for a living. I mean, she was clearly, you know, I guess what I'm saying is, had he responded to her in a negative way, it just would have reaffirmed everything she already thinks she knows about the world. Instead, he was respectful and
kind, very kind, yeah.
And basically, you know, almost putting a hand out there, like, hey, if you want help, reach back. You know, I can't change you. But if you want help, you know, reach back, because there is a way to go that's respectful. You know, you do have worth.
You're
do have
worth
value.
more than what you do for work. And yeah, no, I thought that interview showed a really nice side of Charlie. I think there are other people in the political space who use debating as more of a gotcha, and they try to, you know, kind of dig at people. Charlie was always so respectful. Like, it's hard to find a clip where he wasn't being just like super nice and kind and letting people make their points. I saw one where he was consistently getting interrupted. Like, every couple words, the girl is like back at it, like trying to interrupt him. And he just like stopped talking, and she was like, "Can you please let me make my point?" And he just like silently sat there for like 45 seconds while she talked, and then he was like, "Okay, like let's go back and forth again." So he just came at this whole concept with such a patience and a kindness that we don't really see in political discourse these days.
And I think that the way he behaved, what he built, and the other thing that I don't think can be understated is that he walked it like he talked it. You know, if you look back at some of the other, there are very few people in history where the more you hear about them, the better they get.
Right.
You know, he is definitely one of those people. You know, if you look at other civil rights leaders, other political leaders, you know, whether it's Gandhi or whoever, you know, the more you hear about their personal life, the more you go, that person was, you know, and you kind of have to sit there and make a decision. Okay, this person personally had some horrible things that they did and said, and the way they lived their life didn't line up with the things that they said, but the things that they said were really good. And you kind of have this internal debate on whether or not you're going to respect this person, you know, for what they said, or you're going to respect their way they lived. I haven't seen any evidence that Charlie lived his life any way other than the way he said he lived his life. In no way did he seem to be a hypocrite.
We're not seeing any, like, you know, children
scandal,
from affairs or anything like that, which I think would have come out by now if there was any really bad, you know, stuff hidden under the carpet. I think for the most part he was a good guy. People who know him in real life that I am friends with, like, they've made statements and stuff, and everybody that I've talked to has said he was like such a nice guy in person. And so I don't think we're really going to get any horrible, you know, secrets from his past or anything like that. I think he was genuinely a good guy, and he did a lot of good for political discourse in America.
And by the way, we haven't talked about a single one of the issues that he believed in.
No.
None of this discussion has been, in other words, we don't think he's a good or important or impactful person because of, you know, what he believed. It's the way he conducted himself, what he built, and, you know, the reasons behind all that. It wasn't, you know, it's not that, like, well, hey, he's pro Second Amendment, therefore we're standing up for him, or he liked this or that or whatever. His conservative views, it's got nothing to do with that.
Well, even a few weeks ago, before the assassination occurred, we had a story that we talked about, and we even all, it was even openly said, we don't agree with everything that he stood for and everything that he said.
Yeah.
But we honor him for his technique and the respect that he gave.
Well, I think I came in to the studio last week and actually recorded a number, because a lot of people were reaching out like, hey, where and I actually worked on a number of statements about Charlie Kirk, and I just didn't like any of it, and ended up deleting a lot. But I think that it's very clear. I think what we have added here is to tell you or make clear where we are in history, that this is a historic thing that happened, that I think we're all seeing shifts in people's thinkings, or thinking and the way they evaluate, and hopefully action. And, I want to be clear. I want to make clear that if you're listening to this, I doubt there's a bunch of folks who disagree with the Second Amendment, or don't like the Second Amendment, or don't like gun owners radio. Not a lot of people that are watching this clip. The folks that are watching this right now and listening to this are people who generally agree with us. And we're probably aligned with Charlie Kirk, politically, and appreciated what he did. What I hope you don't do, if his life and what happened touched you in any way, whether you followed him before, had never heard of him, no matter what, no matter where you stand, if it was something, where you thought, I need to start paying attention to this, I need to look more into this, I had never heard of him before, or I had heard of him before, and I need to listen to him more. If this had any effect on you at all, whether it was, it made you sad or frustrated or curious, whatever it was, my hope is that you will follow suit. In other words, be inspired by what he did and the way he did it. Get active, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Get active. Whatever you did last year, do more this year. However you were involved last year, or if you weren't involved at all, get involved this year. If there was something about this story that you internalized in any way, take that as a sign that you need to do what he did, which is get up off the couch and get involved. I think that is absolutely the most American thing that you can do. We are the country of the self-governed. That's exactly what Charlie Kirk was fighting for, and the impact that he had. I actually heard a columnist for the New York Times. He wrote a piece, and he completely disagreed with Charlie Kirk in every way. And he basically said, look, this is how to do politics. What Charlie Kirk was doing is how to do politics. In other words, getting involved, interacting, it's not, you can't be a wallflower and be involved in politics. Get off the internet, stop being mad, start getting active. And hopefully his life and what he was able to accomplish and what he did will inspire you to be more involved and get more, whether it's get involved with us or get involved with another Second Amendment organization or get involved with Turning Point USA. Whatever it means for you to get involved, do more, do more and have an impact. Maybe not, no one's going to have the impact, or very few are going to have the impact that Charlie Kirk had. But it doesn't mean you can't have an impact on something in your life around you. And I hope, by talking about Charlie Kirk, I hope that that's what we've added to the discussion is, hey, where are we in human history right now? How important was Charlie Kirk and his movement, and where should we go from here? And hopefully you've recognized that, yeah, he's clearly very important because he built something amazing and represented a lot of people and gave them hope and gave them direction. But then also, hopefully, you're inspired to do more than you did before. If Charlie can do it, you can do it. So get involved. And my sincerest condolences to anybody who knew Charlie, his friends, family, loved ones. I hope that you're able to find peace. So
it's really sad. The whole thing is really sad, and I hope that the action that comes from this is positive, that there's a lot of people getting involved, politically and making changes in their community and with their friend groups and everything. I hope that is the kind of catalyst for some really great things in the future, but it's just really sad all the way around. And I feel bad for everybody. I feel so bad for his wife and his family, but there's a lot of positive momentum, I think, happening from it, and I guess we can just hope that is continues.
That it continues.
Yeah. I think Erica was just named the new CEO of Turning Point, and so we'll see her hopefully carry her husband's torch well.
I will tell you, as a conservative, as a Christian, as a mom, as all the things, I personally was not ever really felt led to really watch or to get involved. I didn't enjoy, I'm not one, my nature's not to enjoy rhetoric or to debate. That's not really something that I enjoy. So I didn't ever really watch a whole lot of Charlie's videos or his interactions, but I actually agreed with a lot of what he had to say. Not everything, but most of it. And I will tell you, I personally had never felt really spurred to get really involved or anything like that. But I will tell you, since this, I've been talking with my kids, and I will tell you, I bet I'm not alone in having this be something that wakes people up or encourages and encourages or pushes them or leads them in a way that they otherwise wouldn't have gone. I know that a lot of people are angry about what happened, and I know that I personally kind of walk this line of, yes, I'm angry, but at the same time, you think, what was Charlie's power? How did he encourage, and how did he build up Turning Point, and how did he build the community and the things that he had? Is he didn't do it through emotion and anger. He did it through fact and having a strong platform and a foundation of truth. And I, you kind of think, as the human, we got to sometimes try to let's learn from Charlie and kind of take the emotion out of it and lead with fact. And one thing I'd like to do is just kind of end my mind with something that I went to the. Didn't think I'd get emotional. I went to the vigil on Wednesday.
At the church?
I know there's been quite a few of them this week, but I went to one on Wednesday. And there was something that was said. There were lots of statements and people speaking.
Yeah.
And there was, I think it'd be something that would be appropriate to honor the moment. I'd like to read.
Please do.
So, Romans 12, verses 9 through 21. So love must be free of hypocrisy. Detest what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor. Not lagging behind in diligence. Fervent in spirit. Serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope. Persevering in tribulation. Devoting to prayer. Contributing to the needs of the saints. And practicing hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with all in the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never repay evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all people, if possible, so far as it depends on you. Be at peace with all people. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head, and do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And I'll tell you, I've read that quite a bit, and it just hit me. It was read there on the vigil, and it really, to me, spoke to a lot of whether you're a Christian or not, whether you know the scripture or not, irrelevant as far as the message. And I really felt that this spoke in a lot of ways to the whole mindset and how Charlie was powerful in that he didn't approach hostility with hostility, right? I felt like this embodied really well what he lived and what he believed and how he interacted with people. And I thought, you know what, I can walk away and really kind of put this in my mind instead of the anger, right, and the aggression and all of that. Let this kind of be something that's in my mind. And that was powerful to me.
I think it's perfect.
I wanted to share that.
Thank you, Alicia. That's awesome. I think we're going to end right there. Appreciate everybody watching.